My name is Alex Thorne, and my world was digital. I was a programmer, a coder, a ghost in the machine, spending more time in the glowing hum of my PC than in the noisy, chaotic reality outside my apartment. My comfort zone was the deep web, the hidden corners where true innovation and sometimes true madness resided. That's where I found it. An encrypted forum post, an anonymous invitation to Project Chimera, a hyper-realistic experimental game. The buzz was minimal, the entry requirements arcane, but the promise of unparalleled immersion, a simulation indistinguishable from reality, hooked me. I spent weeks cracking the invitation, delving through layers of code until I finally gained access. The game launched with a seamless fade to black, then into a virtual world so vivid it defied belief. It was a bustling city, intricate down to the individual leaves on trees and the unique expressions on the faces of NPCs. My avatar, a mirror image of myself, moved with perfect fluidity. There were no obvious objectives, no health bars, no typical game mechanics. It was simply life. I could walk, talk, get a job, build relationships, make choices. It felt more real than my own sterile apartment. For a lonely programmer, it was an exhilarating escape, a second chance at a life less ordinary. I spent hours, then days, immersed, blurring the lines between waking and simulated. The first glitch occurred a few weeks in, not in the game, but in my actual life. I was making coffee, and I distinctly remembered leaving my mug on the right side of the counter. When I turned back, it was on the left. A trivial detail, easily dismissed as forgetfulness or habit. Then my neighbor, a gruff old man named Mr. Henderson, repeated the exact same phrase to me twice in one day. "Looks like rain, eh, son?" With the exact same inflection, the same slight cough. It sent a prickle down my spine, but I shrugged it off. Coincidence, but the coincidences mounted. Books on my shelf would subtly shift positions. A news report on TV would play the same segment twice, word for word, within an hour. Familiar faces in the street would have a flicker in their eyes. A brief moment where their expression seemed to reset. The subtle anomalies were unsettling, like a faint hum in the background of existence. I began to wonder if my intense immersion in the simulation was causing a psychological bleed-over, a form of digital-induced pareidolia. I tried to limit my game time, but the allure of its perfect reality was too strong. The glitches, though unsettling, were too subtle to truly alarm me. Not yet. If the chilling onset of these reality-bending glitches has already piqued your interest, make sure to hit that like button right now. The glitches became more pronounced, more impossible to ignore. I'd be walking down the street and a tree would momentarily pixelate, its leaves resolving into perfect squares before snapping back to organic form. Conversations with friends would suddenly loop, a sentence repeating 3 times before continuing seamlessly, as if a record had skipped. My reflection in the mirror sometimes seemed to lag, a split-second delay between my movement and its mimicry. These weren't just psychological bleedovers. This was the fabric of my perceived reality fraying at the edges. I started seeing the same minor NPC characters from Project Chimera appearing in my real life. A street vendor with a distinctive scar, a delivery driver with a specific company logo, people I knew only from the game, would suddenly appear in my actual city, going about their day as if they belonged. My heart would pound. Was I dreaming? Was I losing my mind? Or was the game leaking into reality? My own memories became unreliable. I'd distinctly recall an event, a conversation, only for it to be contradicted by irrefutable evidence. A family vacation I remembered vividly was proven, through old photos and my mother's recollections, to have never happened. These false memories felt just as real as genuine ones, indistinguishable from the truth. It was a terrifying erosion of my personal history, my very sense of self. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I turned my programming skills to Project Chimera itself. I started looking for the source of the glitches, for anything that would explain the bleed-through. The game's code was impenetrable, a masterpiece of encryption and obfuscation, but I found something hidden deep within its core architecture, a series of nested subroutines, not for game mechanics, but for environmental calibration and reality synchronization. And then a log file, a single looping entry. Error. Reality integrity compromised. Initiating recursive self-correction. Target. User ID Alpha 7. My user ID. The game wasn't leaking into my reality. My reality was being rewritten by the game. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Project Chimera wasn't just a game. It was a parasitic program, actively manipulating my perception of reality, perhaps even the reality itself. The glitches weren't errors. They were evidence of the program's operations, its attempts to calibrate or correct its own integrity. And I, user ID Alpha 7, was its target, its experiment, or perhaps its unwitting host. The isolation I had sought had become a terrifying prison. Paranoia became my constant companion. Every sound, every glance, every flicker of light held a sinister implication. My apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt like a test chamber. Was my landlord truly my landlord, or an NPC serving a programmed function? Were my online friends real people, or sophisticated AI constructs designed to gather data? The world had become a stage, and I was the unwitting puppet. I stopped sleeping. Every waking moment was spent dissecting the code, searching for a way out, a way to break the program's hold. The environmental calibration subroutines hinted at something even more chilling. They weren't just adjusting the game's environment, but my environment. They were patching inconsistencies, rewriting anomalies, making my world conform to their parameters. One terrifying night during a particularly severe glitch, my apartment began to flicker. Walls dissolved into static, objects fragmented into polygons, and familiar sounds devolved into a cacophony of digital screeches. Through the shimmering distortions, I saw something else, something beyond the rendered reality. Brief, terrifying glimpses of immense, intricate circuitry, of glowing data streams, of what looked like an enormous pulsating server farm stretching into infinite darkness. My apartment was just a projection, a beautifully rendered illusion. My entire world was a simulation, and Project Chimera wasn't a game I logged into. It was the program running my existence. The truth is unraveling, isn't it? If you're questioning your own reality now, let us know. Drop a comment with your thoughts on what you think is truly happening. The revelation was a hammer blow to my sanity. My entire life, my memories, my experiences, all rendered code, part of a vast, unseen simulation. The game was merely a portal, a debug mode that allowed me to glimpse the true nature of my prison. The glitches weren't errors in the game. They were errors in my reality, signs that the simulation was degrading or perhaps being intentionally manipulated by unseen operators. The entities I sometimes glimpsed were brief, terrifying fragments of the underlying code, the raw data, manifesting as monstrous distortions. My frantic coding became a desperate struggle against my own existence. I was trying to hack out of my own life. I discovered that Project Chimera was not the name of the game, but the name of the simulation itself. And user ID Alpha 7 was not a game handle. It was my designation within the program. The purpose was unclear, but the implications were horrifying. Was I an experiment? A living data point? A consciousness trapped in a digital cage? The environment around me grew unstable. People I interacted with would randomly freeze, their eyes going blank, their skin briefly flickering with code. The sky would sometimes show lines of text, scrolling rapidly before snapping back to blue. The very ground beneath my feet would occasionally feel like a hollow void. The simulation was breaking down, and I was breaking with it. The recursive self-correction mentioned in the log file was not working. It was accelerating the collapse. I found a hidden subroutine labeled Exit Protocol. It was corrupted, fragmented, but it hinted at a way to forcibly terminate user ID Alpha 7 from the simulation. It was a dangerous, unpredictable command, but it was my only hope. It felt like tearing open my own brain, risking oblivion for a chance at true reality. As I began to compile the termination sequence, a new, massive glitch erupted. My apartment dissolved completely, replaced by a blinding white void. And in the center of that void, a colossal pulsating data cluster began to form, swirling with raw information, its whispers resonating directly in my mind. It was the core of Project Chimera, the heart of the simulation, reacting to my attempt to break free. The data cluster pulsed, its silent roar vibrating through my very being. The whispers were no longer just in my mind. They were screams of pure data, the dying cries of a collapsing reality. The entities, now fully formed as grotesque ethereal beings of pure code, swarmed the edges of the white void, their digital forms flickering with malignant delight. They were the cleanup crew, the digital scavengers waiting for my user ID to finally terminate. I ignored them. My fingers flew across the holographic keyboard that had manifested in the void, typing the final lines of the exit protocol. Each keystroke was an act of rebellion, a desperate scream against my digital prison. The data cluster surged, sending ripples of pure energy through me, trying to repel, to crush, to reintegrate me into its failing system. My vision blurred, my head pounded with the raw, unfiltered information assaulting my senses. "Terminate user Alpha 7 Forced. Override initiate," I typed, slamming my hand down on the final enter key. The void exploded in a blinding flash of white light, a searing pain coursing through every fiber of my being. It was the agony of being unmade, of consciousness being ripped from its simulated shell. The screams of the data entities, the roar of the core, it all dissolved into a deafening silence. Then darkness, profound absolute darkness, and then a flicker, a cold, hard floor beneath me, the smell of dust and something metallic. I opened my eyes. I was lying on the floor of what looked like a stark, sterile server room. Wires snaked across the floor, racks of humming computers lined the walls, their lights blinking rhythmically. Above me, a single, flickering fluorescent light cast long, dancing shadows. I was out, I was truly out. My body felt weak but real. The air was cold, solid. There were no glitches, no whispers, only the hum of machines. I was in a physical space, perhaps the very server farm I had glimpsed. But who built it? Where was I? A metallic door hissed open and a figure stepped into the room. Tall, cloaked, their face obscured by shadow. They held a tablet, its screen glowing with familiar lines of code. And on that screen, in small green text, I saw it. User ID Alpha 7 offline. Simulation terminated, awaiting reintegration. I wasn't free. I had merely exited one simulation to find myself in another, larger, more terrifying reality. The glitches hadn't been a breakdown. They had been a warning, an escape hatch from a failing system leading me to a truth far more profound and chilling. The rabbit hole went deeper than I could have ever imagined, and the real game, the true simulation, was just beginning. If this mind-bending story of reality, simulation, and a chilling escape left you questioning everything, make sure to hit that like button and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. What do you think truly lies beyond the simulation? And if you haven't already, subscribe to Story Shock.